The Pentagon's 2024 China Military Power Report states that China's air forces now operate over 3,150 aircraft. The report notes that the People's Liberation Army Air Force is modernizing and indigenizing its aircraft and unmanned aerial systems, rapidly matching U.S. standards. That phrase, rapidly matching U.S. standards, represents a significant shift in how American defense officials describe Chinese aviation capabilities. For decades, Pentagon assessments emphasize the qualitative gap between American and Chinese military aviation. That language is changing. Consider the J20 Mighty Dragon, China's first fifth-generation stealth fighter. The aircraft made its first flight in January 2011. It entered operational service in March 2017. That is roughly 6 years from first flight to combat-ready squadrons. The F-22 Raptor, America's first fifth-generation fighter, took 8 years from first engineering and manufacturing development flight in September 1997 to initial operational capability in December 2005. The F-35 Lightning II took 10 years from first flight in December 2006 to Air Force initial operational capability in August 2016. These timelines reveal fundamentally different philosophies about how to develop military aircraft, and the gap appears to be widening rather than narrowing. This video breaks down exactly why Chinese and Western approaches differ so dramatically. We will examine the specific data behind each method, the trade-offs each accepts, and what it means for the future balance of air power. The numbers tell a story that extends far beyond any single aircraft program. Before examining specific programs, we need to establish what aircraft testing actually involves. A fifth-generation stealth fighter contains millions of lines of software code. The F-35 runs on approximately 8 million lines of code. The aircraft integrates dozens of sensors that must work together seamlessly. Radar, infrared search and track, electronic warfare systems, and communications all feed into a central processor that fuses their inputs into a coherent picture for the pilot. The airframe itself must perform across a massive flight envelope while maintaining stealth characteristics. Stealth coatings degrade with use. Panel gaps can increase radar signature. Control surfaces must maintain precise alignment. The engines must deliver required thrust without exceeding thermal limits that would compromise infrared signature. Weapons systems must integrate with onboard computers, with external networks, and with the weapons themselves. None of this works automatically. Testing is how engineers verify that all these systems function as designed. It is how pilots learn the aircraft's actual limits, which may differ from calculated limits. It is how manufacturers identify problems before those problems kill pilots or compromise combat effectiveness. Every military aviation nation conducts testing. The question is how much testing, in what sequence, and how much risk is acceptable before operational deployment. One important caveat applies throughout this analysis. For Chinese programs, we are inferring from timelines, prototype sightings, satellite imagery, and official statements. Test hour counts and mishap rates are not publicly disclosed. Western analysts can observe that Chinese aircraft move from first flight to operational service faster than Western equivalents. We cannot observe exactly how much testing occurs during that compressed timeline or what incidents may have happened. This information asymmetry limits how precisely we can compare the two approaches. Keep this in mind throughout. Western nations, particularly the United States, developed their testing philosophies during the Cold War and refined them through hard experience. The Century Series fighters of the 1950s were developed rapidly but suffered high accident rates. The F-104 Starfighter earned the nickname Widowmaker in German service, with over 30% of Luftwaffe F-104s lost to accidents. These experiences shaped subsequent emphasis on thorough testing before operational deployment. The Department of Defense acquisition system now operates through sequential phases mandated by law and regulation. A typical program proceeds through material solution analysis, then technology maturation and risk reduction, then engineering and manufacturing development, and finally production and deployment. Each phase has specific entrance and exit criteria. Programs cannot advance until they demonstrate readiness. The Director of Operational Test and Evaluation, a position established by Congress in 1983, provides independent assessment of major defense acquisition programs. The DOT&E reports directly to the Secretary of Defense and to Congress, not to the military services running the programs. This independence matters. The DOT&E can prevent programs from proceeding beyond low-rate initial production until operational effectiveness and suitability are certified. This creates a deliberate check on program momentum designed to prevent premature fielding of immature systems. The logic behind this approach is sound. Rushing an aircraft into service with undiscovered flaws can be catastrophic. Problems found during operational testing are expensive to fix because production has already begun. Problems found after fielding are even more expensive because aircraft must be recalled and modified. The testing process exists to find problems early, when they are cheaper and easier to fix, and before pilots stake their lives on untested systems. The Government Accountability Office regularly assesses how this process performs in practice. A December 2024 GAO report to Congress examined acquisition timelines across major defense programs. The report stated that on average, the Department of Defense takes almost 12 years to deliver the first version of a weapon system. This figure measures from program start to initial capability across major acquisition programs broadly, not specifically fighter aircraft. But it illustrates the institutional timeline that shapes American weapons development. The GAO assessment includes a concerning conclusion about modern relevance. The report warns that DoD remains deeply entrenched in a traditional linear acquisition structure characterized by rigid, sequential processes. This approach not only delays the delivery of advanced technologies to the warfighter, but also risks delivering systems that are already obsolete or inadequate for addressing rapidly evolving threats. The process designed to ensure capable systems may now be producing systems that arrive too late to address the threats they were designed to counter. China developed its aircraft testing approach more recently, drawing on different historical experiences and facing different strategic pressures. The People's Liberation Army Air Force operated Soviet-derived aircraft for decades. Chinese aerospace engineers spent years reverse engineering foreign designs, from the J-6, based on the MiG-19, to the J-7, based on the MiG-21. This experience built manufacturing capability, but not design expertise. Indigenous engine development proved particularly challenging. Chinese engineers struggled for decades to produce reliable, high-performance turbofan engines. The WS-10 program, intended to power Chinese fighters, experienced repeated setbacks and delays. China remained dependent on Russian engines for frontline fighters well into the 2000s. This engine gap constrained what Chinese aircraft designers could achieve. When China began developing indigenous advanced fighters in the 1990s and 2000s, strategic necessity demanded speed. China faced potential adversaries operating F-15s, F-16s, F-18s, and eventually F-22s. The capability gap was enormous. Closing that gap through Western-style 20-year development programs would have meant permanent inferiority. The solution was what analysts now call the fly-fix-fly approach. The fly-fix-fly method deploys interim versions of aircraft rapidly, then conducts continuous upgrades based on operational experience. Rather than completing comprehensive testing before operational service, aircraft enter squadrons with known limitations and evolve through service. Testing continues after fielding rather than preceding it exclusively. This accepts risk that Western processes explicitly avoid, but it also delivers capability to operational units faster. The J20 Mighty Dragon program illustrates this approach in detail. Development likely began in the late 1990s, though exact program timelines are not publicly confirmed. First flight occurred January 11, 2011, with test pilot Li Gang completing a 15-minute sortie from Chengdu Aircraft Corporation's facility. The timing was notable. U.S. Secretary of Defense Robert Gates was visiting Beijing for meetings with Chinese leadership when the J-20 flew. By late 2014, at least 5 J-20 prototypes were flying simultaneously. These aircraft were designated 2001, 2002, 2011, 2012, and 2015 based on external markings. Based on external observation of flight activity and configuration differences, analysts believe each prototype likely tested different systems concurrently. One might focus on flight envelope expansion, while another tested avionics, integration, and a third evaluated weapons bay functionality. The exact test assignments are not publicly confirmed, but the parallel approach is evident from the number of aircraft flying simultaneously. The J-20 achieved operational status in March 2017. During that roughly 6-year development period from first flight to service entry, China did not wait for all systems to mature before moving forward. Most notably, the aircraft entered service with interim engines because the planned WS-15 power plant was not ready. The WS-15 had been in development since the early 2000s, but continued to experience problems achieving required thrust and reliability. Early J-20 production aircraft used Russian AL-31FN engines, the same power plant used in Chinese Su-27 derivatives. Later aircraft switched to the domestic WS-10C, an improved variant of the engine originally developed for the J-10 and J-11. Neither engine delivers the supercruise capability that the WS-15 is designed to provide. Supercruise, the ability to sustain supersonic flight without afterburner, is considered a key fifth-generation capability. The J-20 operates without it. This would be difficult to accept in a Western acquisition framework. The F-35 program delayed fielding repeatedly to address software and systems integration issues. The F-22 underwent extensive testing to validate the F-119 engines before operational service. The concept of fielding an aircraft with an interim engine, planning to retrofit the intended engine later, conflicts fundamentally with how American programs define operational capability. An American program would delay IOC until the specified engine was available and validated, but consider the alternative calculation Chinese planners faced. China could field J20s with interim engines immediately, accepting reduced performance while continuing engine development. Or China could wait years or potentially decades for the WS-15 and field nothing. During that waiting period, potential adversaries would continue operating and improving their fifth-generation fleets. The Chinese calculation prioritizes capability in the force now, over capability perfection later. The aircraft can be upgraded as better engines become available. The capability gap could not wait. Open-source estimates of current J20 fleet size vary significantly and should be treated with appropriate uncertainty. Some analysts assess the fleet at approximately 195 aircraft by mid-2024, while others suggest higher numbers based on observed production activity and satellite imagery of aircraft at operational bases. Production rate estimates similarly range from roughly 70 per year to over 100, depending on assumptions about assembly line capacity, shift patterns, and observed airframe deliveries. What is clear from available evidence is that production has accelerated significantly since dedicated J20 assembly facilities came online. Satellite imagery shows expanded production infrastructure at Chengdu. The fleet continues growing at a rate that exceeds current American fifth-generation production. The exact numbers matter less than the trajectory. The J35 program demonstrates similar compressed timelines, though with important caveats about what has been publicly confirmed versus what remains uncertain. The aircraft exists in multiple variants. The FC-31, sometimes called the J-31, served as a technology demonstrator and export-oriented design starting in 2012. The current J-35 designation covers refined variants intended for Chinese military service. The carrier-capable J-35 variant reportedly first flew in October 2021. Reports and imagery indicate that China's third aircraft carrier Fujian conducted electromagnetic catapult testing with fixed-wing aircraft during 2025 sea trials. Fujian is equipped with an electromagnetic aircraft launch system similar in concept to the American EMALS on USS Gerald R. Ford. However, the specific aircraft types involved in these tests and their certification status are not fully confirmed in public reporting. Some context on electromagnetic catapult testing is important here. The United States tested F-35C launches with EMALS at shore facilities at Naval Air Engineering Station Lakehurst, years before Ford-class C operations. What makes Fujian significant, if J-35 operations are confirmed, is at sea electromagnetic catapult operations with a stealth fighter from a commissioned carrier. But claims about firsts require careful qualification given incomplete public information about what testing has occurred and when. The land-based J-35, a variant, first flew September 26, 2023. At the November 2024 Zhuhai Air Show, the J-35A appeared in what analysts assessed as a more operationally equipped configuration with different sensor housings and equipment compared to earlier prototypes. Some observers speculate this configuration could indicate service entry within 18 to 24 months of first flight, though this timeline remains uncertain and would represent faster fielding than typical Western programs achieve. China's sixth-generation fighter development provides the most striking recent example of rapid iteration. On December 26, 2024, footage emerged of a new tailless Chinese aircraft in flight near Chengdu. The aircraft featured a distinctive flying wing configuration with what appeared to be 3 engines. Images of a second tailless design with a different planform also appeared around the same time, associated with Shenyang Aircraft Corporation in northeastern China. Western analysts designated these as sixth-generation fighter prototypes from China's 2 major fighter manufacturers. The parallel development of competing designs mirrors historical American practice, when Lockheed and Northrop both built YF-22 and YF-23 prototypes for the advanced tactical fighter competition. China appears to be pursuing a similar approach, with both Chengdu and Shenyang developing sixth-generation designs simultaneously. By late 2025, roughly 10 months after initial sightings, imagery showed what appeared to be a second Chengdu prototype with visible modifications from the December 2024 aircraft. Defense analysts noted changes to engine nozzle configuration, suggesting different thrust vectoring arrangements, revised intake geometry, and a modified landing gear layout. Open-source imagery suggests rapid physical iteration between prototypes, with design changes implemented in hardware and flown, rather than remaining in computer models or wind tunnel testing for extended periods. For comparison, The U.S. Next Generation Air Dominance program followed a different development path that incorporated some elements of accelerated testing while maintaining traditional program structures. In September 2020, Air Force Acquisition Chief Will Roper revealed that a full-scale flight demonstrator had already flown secretly. The announcement surprised observers who expected NGAD to remain in early development. The demonstrator had accumulated what officials described as hundreds of test hours before the public disclosure. This approach, using classified demonstrators to validate key technologies before formal program announcements and contractor selection, represents American adaptation to competitive pressure. The Air Force could explore design concepts and prove technologies without the overhead of a formal major defense acquisition program during early experimentation. In March 2025, President Donald Trump announced that Boeing had won the NGAD competition. The aircraft received the designation F-47. Air Force officials emphasized that the program benefited from those earlier demonstrator flights, which validated key technologies before production contractor selection. The demonstrator experience reportedly informed requirements and reduced technical risk for the production program. However, first production F-47 flight is projected for approximately 2028. Initial operational capability timing has not been officially stated, but likely falls around 2030 or later based on typical program timelines. This means the F-47 may enter service several years after Chinese sixth-generation designs if Chinese programs maintain their observed development pace. The competitive implications are significant, though comparing programs at different development stages involves considerable uncertainty. The F-35 program illustrates both the significant strengths and the real challenges of comprehensive Western testing methodology. The system development and demonstration phase ran from 2006 through 2018. During that period, 18 F-35 test aircraft flew over 9,200 sorties. They accumulated more than 17,000 flight hours. They executed over 65,000 individual test points covering flight performance, systems integration, weapons delivery, and carrier operations for the C variant. The program did not suffer a single Class A mishap during developmental testing. That safety record is remarkable by any standard and demonstrates the genuine value of methodical testing. When a pilot straps into an F-35, that pilot can trust the aircraft has been validated across thousands of test conditions. Systems integration problems, flight control anomalies, and weapons delivery issues were identified and resolved before aircraft reached combat squadrons. The testing investment prevents surprises in combat, but the timeline tells another part of the story. The Joint Strike Fighter program launched in 1993 with the Joint Advanced Strike Technology Initiative. Lockheed Martin won the competition in 2001. First flight came in December 2006. Marine Corps initial operational capability arrived July 2015. Air Force IOC followed August 2016. Navy IOC came February 2019. From program launch to Marine Corps IOC, the F-35 took 22 years. The Air Force and Navy variants took 23 and 26 years respectively. Current F-35 production faces additional challenges that illuminate the complexity of modern fighter programs. The fiscal year 2024 GAO assessment found that all 110 F-35 aircraft delivered that year arrived late, with an average delay of 238 days. Late deliveries have become a persistent pattern rather than an exception. More concerning for combat readiness, 174 aircraft remained in what the program calls provisionally delivered status. These aircraft have been delivered to the Air Force, but lack full combat capability because they await the TR-3 technology refresh software upgrade. The TR-3 upgrade includes enhanced processing power and new capabilities. Until aircraft receive the upgrade, they cannot employ the full range of planned weapons and systems. The TR-3 situation illustrates how software refresh cycles collide with traditional procurement structures. Modern fighters require continuous software updates to maintain capability against evolving threats. New threat systems emerge. Electronic warfare environments change. Weapons require integration. These updates must be tested and validated before deployment, creating ongoing development requirements. But the acquisition system was designed for hardware programs with defined endpoints. You develop the aircraft, you test it, you produce it, you field it. Software-intensive systems do not have clear endpoints. The F-35 will require software updates throughout its service life, creating integration and testing challenges that the original acquisition framework did not anticipate. Block 4 capabilities continue development years after initial fielding. European programs reveal additional complications that arise from multinational development structures. The Eurofighter Typhoon Consortium included the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, and Spain. The program launched in 1983 with initial feasibility studies. First prototype flight occurred in March 1994. Germany achieved initial operational capability in August 2003, that is roughly 20 years from program launch to operational service, and 9 years from first prototype flight. The Typhoon program used 12 development aircraft. 7 were prototypes built specifically for testing. 5 were instrumented production aircraft that contributed to the test program while demonstrating production processes. Together, these aircraft flew over 2,500 sorties and accumulated more than 2,100 flight hours by December 2002. The testing was thorough and validated the aircraft's performance envelope and systems integration comprehensively. But consortium management created recurring friction and delays. France withdrew from the consortium in 1985 over workshare disputes, demanding a larger percentage of work than partner nations were willing to provide, and disagreeing over design authority. France proceeded independently with what became the Rafale. Germany nearly withdrew after reunification in 1991, when the Soviet threat that justified the program dissolved and budget pressures mounted. A single prototype crash in November 2002 triggered 6-month delivery delays because resolving the investigation and resuming production required consensus among 4 nations with different priorities and procedures. Each nation wanted assurance that the problem was understood and fixed. Reaching that consensus took time. The French Rafale program offers contrast as a single-nation development effort. Dassault developed the Rafale after France departed the Eurofighter consortium in 1985. The ACX contract came in 1983. The Rafale A technology demonstrator flew in July 1986, just 3 years from contract to first flight. That pace demonstrated what concentrated national authority could achieve without multinational coordination overhead. However, post-Cold War budget constraints stretched total Rafale development significantly. With the Soviet Union collapsed and defense budgets declining across Europe, France could not fund rapid production. Naval initial operational capability arrived June 2004, roughly 18 years from demonstrator flight. The timeline was driven by budget constraints rather than testing requirements. France had the aircraft. France took nearly 2 decades to field it in quantity. The experience gap between aerospace workforces may matter as much as any individual program timeline. A September 2025 analysis from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute examined this dimension of competition. The analysis observed that Chinese aerospace engineers have had opportunities to work on multiple fighter programs, cycling through development to production in relatively rapid succession. An engineer joining Chengdu Aircraft Corporation in the late 1990s could have participated in JF-17 development for Pakistan, J10 development and production, J20 development and now production, and currently 6th generation development. 4 distinct combat aircraft programs reaching service or nearing service in roughly 25 years. Each program builds on lessons from the previous one. Each program gives engineers experience seeing problems emerge and implementing solutions. The contrast with American industry is notable. Fewer new fighter programs have cycled through American companies in recent decades. The F-22 ended production in 2011 after just 195 aircraft. The F-35 has been in production for years but remains a single ongoing program that engineers can work on for an entire career. The F-47 will be the first new American fighter program to reach production in decades. This difference affects how institutional knowledge accumulates. Engineers learn through completing programs, through seeing how design decisions play out over a full development cycle. An industry that completes 4 major fighter programs develops different workforce capabilities than an industry focused on a single long-running program. The Chinese workforce is gaining experience that American engineers cannot easily replicate given current program structure. Different risk tolerances fundamentally shape these outcomes. China's approach accepts higher uncertainty about aircraft maturity at initial fielding. Systems may not be fully validated. Problems may emerge in operational service that comprehensive testing would have caught earlier. Aircraft may operate with limitations that planned upgrades will eventually address. The opacity of Chinese programs means Western observers cannot assess how often problems occur or how severe the consequences have been. Western testing catches more problems before fielding but takes longer to complete. The GAO's assessment that current timelines risk delivering obsolete systems reflects growing concern that thoroughness has costs beyond schedule. If a program takes 12 years or more to deliver initial capability, the threat environment may have changed fundamentally during development. The aircraft designed to counter one threat may face a different threat by the time it reaches squadrons. Recent developments suggest both sides are adapting their approaches. The American use of classified demonstrators for NGAD shows willingness to accelerate technology validation outside traditional acquisition structures. Rather than waiting for a formal program to fund early flight testing, the Air Force flew experimental aircraft under special access programs to prove concepts and inform requirements. This represents meaningful acceleration while maintaining engineering rigor for actual production systems. Digital engineering and model-based systems engineering initiatives aim to compress development timelines while maintaining testing thoroughness. These approaches use detailed computer models throughout development, allowing engineers to test integration virtually before building physical prototypes. The goal is reducing the number of physical test articles needed and accelerating the design iteration cycle. Whether these methods will significantly change fielding timelines remains to be demonstrated at scale. China continues demonstrating rapid iteration in physical hardware. The pace of visible changes between sixth-generation prototypes suggests aggressive testing in flight rather than extended phases of ground testing and computer simulation. Whether this approach produces mature combat systems or aircraft requiring extensive post-fielding correction will become clear as these programs progress toward service entry. The strategic context shapes how these differences matter. The United States has not faced a near-peer air force on roughly equal technical footing since the Korean War era. American air superiority in every conflict since has rested on qualitative technological advantages, superior training, investment, and numerical sufficiency for the theaters involved. Pentagon assessments indicate the qualitative technology gap is narrowing. The rapidly matching U.S. standards language in the 2024 China Military Power Report reflects official recognition of Chinese progress. American advantages in pilot training may persist. U.S. pilots accumulate more annual flying hours than Chinese counterparts based on available information. Training and tactics matter enormously in air combat, but fleet-size trajectories create legitimate concern for American planners. The F-22 fleet of 185 aircraft is aging, with the oldest airframes approaching 20 years of service. That fleet will not be directly replaced. The F-35 program continues, but faces production challenges and software delays. The F-47 remains years from operational service. Meanwhile, Chinese stealth fighter production continues at rates that clearly exceed American fifth-generation production, even accounting for uncertainty in the estimates. If China produces 70 to 100 J-20s per year, while America produces roughly 50 F-35s annually, the numerical balance shifts steadily over time. Add J-35 production beginning, and the shift accelerates. Different nations and different analysts will draw different lessons from this analysis. The value of comprehensive testing is real and should not be dismissed. The F-35's zero Class A mishaps during development represents lives saved. Aircraft that perform as expected give pilots confidence in combat that cannot be easily quantified. These considerations matter, but timeline matters too. The aircraft a nation operates today provides capability that aircraft still under development cannot. If development programs take so long that systems arrive obsolete or numerically insufficient, testing rigor provides limited strategic benefit. The GAO's conclusion that more radical change is needed reflects growing recognition of this tension in American defense circles. The most likely outcome is continued pressure for acquisition reform. Congress has directed the Department of Defense to explore faster pathways for delivering capabilities. Multiple initiatives attempt to create alternatives to traditional sequential acquisition. Software-intensive systems create opportunities for agile development methods that were not applicable to earlier hardware-centric programs. But institutional change is slow. The acquisition workforce numbers tens of thousands of people who have spent careers operating within current processes. The defense industrial base has structured production lines and workforce around long development timelines and steady production runs. Defense contractors have built business models around programs lasting decades. Changing how the United States develops fighter aircraft requires changing how thousands of people and dozens of organizations work. That does not happen quickly, even with strong leadership intent. China's approach has vulnerabilities as well. Engine technology remains a persistent challenge despite decades of investment. The WS-15, intended for the J-20, has been in development since the early 2000s. Chinese stealth fighters currently operate with engines that limit performance compared to Western equivalents. Whether aircraft fielded with known limitations perform effectively in actual combat remains untested. The opacity that limits Western understanding of Chinese programs may also limit Chinese learning. External criticism and independent testing organizations provide feedback that helps Western programs identify problems. Chinese programs may lack equivalent outside scrutiny. Internal feedback mechanisms may or may not compensate effectively. What the data makes clear is that different philosophies produce different outcomes at different speeds. China moves aircraft from first flight to operational service faster than Western equivalents by every observable metric. Western programs produce aircraft that have been more thoroughly validated through disclosed comprehensive testing. Both approaches involve real trade-offs that cannot be wished away. The strategic environment determines which trade-offs matter more. In peacetime competition, comprehensive testing seems obviously preferable. Why accept risk when urgency is low? In a competition that may become a conflict on uncertain timelines, speed becomes more valuable. The aircraft you can operate matters more than the aircraft you are still developing. American defense planners appear increasingly concerned that current timelines create strategic risk. Whether reforms can close the development timeline gap while maintaining the benefits of rigorous testing remains the central challenge. The next decade will reveal which approach better serves its nation's strategic interests. Sixth-generation fighters from both China and the United States will enter operational service. Their performance in exercises, in potential crises, and possibly in conflict will test the assumptions underlying each development philosophy. Until then, the observable data shows two fundamentally different approaches to building advanced fighter aircraft, and one of them consistently delivers aircraft to operational squadrons faster than the other. For coverage of the F-35 program and its current challenges, check the video linked in the description. Subscribe for more data-driven aircraft analysis.